So here we are, once again. Welcome to the Mark Z Drumcast. I'm your host, Mark Z, the owner and founder of MarkZDrums. I've been a drummer since I'm 7, and I have been the owner and founder of MarkZDrums for about 12 years. By the end of today, you will have many more uses and ideas for triplets. We started this a couple of shows ago, a couple of Drumcasts ago, when we began to talk about creating fills. And how can we create fills? We need to find seeds or kernels or ideas or figures, something simple to start, and start to see how we can expand these things beyond what they originally were. And so we started out with straight 16th notes, but then we started to talk about triplets and how a triplet is simply created when a third note is shoved in between two eighth notes in a beat. And because an eighth note equals half a beat, we have 2 per beat. If we put a third eighth note in there, we have 3 per beat, which is then called an eighth note triplet. And so the first note stays where it is, the second note gets pushed in there, and then the third note shifts over a little bit so that all 3 notes are equally distanced from one another. And the result is so you have a triplet note, 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. When we apply the same idea to 16th notes, remembering that each 16th note is worth a quarter of a beat, so every beat can hold 4 16th notes, we put another 16th note in between the first 2 and another one in between the second 2, and we have now 6 notes per beat where we used to have 4 16th notes per beat. And that sounds like this. So with a 16th note triplet, we are essentially putting a 16th note on the first eighth note of the beat, and then at the midway point on the and, we're doing another triplet. So we could count it like that. 1 triplet and triplet, 2 triplet and triplet. It's an easier way to count 16th note triplets. So we started to talk about ways that we can use triplets around the drum set. And then I said, besides just doing them on the snare drum, let's start to move them around using the other toms. And so we came up with So if we now start to figure out how many ways can we alternate our hands and use our different drums with triplets, we can come up with a lot of different cool sounding ideas using triplets, okay? But first and foremost, what I would say is just sit down on your pad or your snare drum or wherever you practice, give yourself a nice steady quarter note bass drum, and practice eighth note triplets. Then with that same nice steady quarter note bass drum, practice 16th note triplets. And then work on the exercise I did on the last show, which was with a nice even steady quarter note bass drum, play 2 bars of quarter notes, 2 bars of eighth notes, 2 bars of eighth note triplets, 2 bars of 16th notes, 2 bars of 16th note triplets, and 2 bars of 30-second notes for fun. And how do we count 30-second notes, by the way? We count 16th notes, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a, but we play 2 notes for every 16th note we count, giving us 30-second notes. Because as we all know, or maybe we don't all know, a 16th note cut in half yields us 2 30-second notes. If you think about it, we're going to talk way more about note relationships. They're very important, even if we're just dabbling in reading. Maybe we don't want to go crazy with our reading, but we want to know enough to understand basic ideas and concepts written down, like maybe rock beats. So in order to do that, we want to have a basic understanding of note relationships. And think of it like this. The largest note we have is a whole note, which is equal to 4 beats. If we cut that in half, that gives us 2 half notes, which are worth 2 beats each. If we cut each one of those half notes in half, that gives us 2 quarter notes each. So then we end up with 4 quarter notes in a measure. If we cut each one of those quarter notes in half, we get 2 eighth notes each, which will give us 8 eighth notes in a measure. And the same if we cut the eighth notes in half, we come up with 2 16th notes for every eighth note we cut in half, giving us 16 16th notes per measure. And if we do it once again, we get 32 30-second notes per measure. So all we're doing is we're cutting notes into smaller parts, and then we could start mixing and matching and combining them. As long as they add up, the combinations we choose add up to 1 beat, we're all good. I like the analogy that I came up with, which was, if you think about a measure, which is a section of music, being a pizza box, and you're hungry for dinner, and you call up the pizza place and you say, hey, pizza place, send me over a pizza pie, extra cheese, pepperoni, but don't cut it. That is your whole note, okay? And the box is your measure. So you have 1 big pizza pie, extra cheese, pepperoni, which is the equivalent of 1 whole note, which equals 4 beats. But there's no cuts in it, so it's a whole note. And we play 1, 2, 3, 4. And that note lasts for 4 beats. Now, if we say to the pizza guy, hey, send me over a large cheese pizza, extra cheese, pepperoni, cut it once down the middle. Me and my buddy are hungry, and we're going to fold up half a pizza and eat it like that. That's the equivalent of 2 half notes in a measure, equaling 2 beats each, right? So we're still coming up with 4 beats in a measure. We cut that pizza again. Now we have 4 equal slices. Those are 4 quarter notes. And again, you cut it to a normal pizza, a normal pizza standard, which is 8 slices. Those are 8 eighth notes. And again, oh, you know what? We have a bunch of little ones here, and they don't eat whole slices, so could you please cut it again? Now we have 16 smaller pieces inside that box or inside that measure. 16 notes, 16 slices of pizza. If you get really crazy and you cut them in half again, all those slices, you make more cuts. Now you have 32 slices in the box or 32 little notes in the measure. Okay, so any questions about that analogy, please go ahead and put it in the chat. I promise we're gonna talk more about note relations. But just to give you a quick overview, and I'm sure a lot of you understand what I'm talking about already. But once you start getting into notes and note relationships, it works itself out. It's pretty easy to understand. It's just at first we look at things sometimes and they just seem to be difficult to understand, or they seem complex. And then after we start to get to understand what's going on, it becomes much simpler. So I'm going to give myself a nice steady quarter note bass drum, and then I'm going to do some triplets around the drum kit. I'm going to combine 8th note and 16th note triplets. But later on in the podcast, later on in the Drumcast, later on in the show, I'm going to be doing something very different with triplets that you're going to want to see. So that's a little tease. So stick around. Anyway, so here we go. Quarter note bass drums, 8th note triplets, 16th note triplet combinations. Here we go. Eighth note triplets, moving my hands around the drum kit. If you were to like write this out, you could add accents and then use those accents to play the accented notes on different drums. There's a book called Syncopation, which has a really cool triplet section with accents on certain notes. And so when you start to take those accents, you start them on the pad or on the snare drum, and you accent those notes by playing them louder. But then you could also do it a different way and use those accented notes to signal what notes we're going to play on different drums. And then that comes up with some cool patterns. So anytime, real quick tip, anytime you have, let's say you got a practice sheet, you're working out of a book, like Syncopation. Syncopation has many, many ways to work through that book. And it's really, really cool. If you look it up online, different ways to work through the Syncopation drum book, you will see that there's a lot of different ways that the author intended for you to work through the book. And with any book that you have, if you get a certain page that's, let's say, snare drum fills, use those rhythms that they're giving you in the book and then start to experiment with on the different drums. So you're taking a piece of practice material that is meant to be played only on the snare drum according to the author, but we want to now try to expand it, and we want to now play around with these same rhythms but use them on different drums. So that's a really good way to get like a lot of mileage out of a book or out of a piece of material that you have with exercises on it to work on. And also flipping. When you have beat books, flip those bass drums and snare drum notes in your mind, play them differently. The exercise book I'm going to show you now, we'll talk a little bit about that and what I mean, right? So that was 8th note triplets around the drum kit. A little sloppy at times, but you know, this is kind of just coming off the cuff, off the top of my head. Quarter note steady on the bass drum. And now I want to do some 16th note triplets with a steady quarter note bass drum. So as you can see, 16th notes around. A couple of times in there, I paused, right? I threw in a rest. That's a whole nother level now, right? I'm sorry, I keep getting distracted by my monitor. That's a whole nother level now. Because you want to learn how to do your straight 8th note triplets and your straight 16th note triplets. And then you want to start experimenting with resting certain notes in those triplet figures to give you even cooler rhythms. We also do that with a 16th note, a group of 16th notes, 4 per beat, and we play them but then if we rest certain 16th notes in those groupings, we come up with different rhythms. So that's a whole nother level of creativity that we're going to start to explore as we move down the road of these triplets. So have fun with it. Start off slow. Start off at whatever pace you're comfortable at, because again, the name of the game is that we're playing this stuff nice and evenly. And then as we get more comfortable, as we get more solid with it, and it's really even and strong, then we start to pick up the pace a little bit. We start to add some speed. We start to tick up the BPMs slowly but surely. And before you know it, we'll be very comfortable playing faster tempos of these exercises. So there's a couple of different things that we can do. Don't forget your cymbals. With 16th note triplets around the kit, 8th note triplets around the kit. So let me show you this exercise sheet that I was talking about on the last Drumcast, right? This is hand-foot warm-ups in preparation for rock beats with 16th note triplets using alternating hands, right? So this is what I was talking about yesterday. I got it a little bit wrong. It is 16th note triplets. And in the first exercise, the first part of the exercise, the first bar we see, we are to play 16th note triplets on the snare drum, except for the last one, which we would play on the bass drum. Something like this. And there you have it. There is a link to this page in the description of Monday's Drumcast. Okay, so go ahead and check that out. I'll also put this in the description of today's Drumcast, so you could download it. If you downloaded it on Monday, great. Go through it, look at it. You also go on, and we're moving the bass drum back one, and then we're doing 2 bass drum notes to replace part of these triplets, and so on and so forth. And it gets pretty interesting as we move along. Let me try the second one here. And now number 3. I'll do the next 2 so you get an idea, and then I'll show you something else. And there you go. So now get all of these down with the snare drum and the bass drum, work through all of these exercises, and then take those very same snare drum notes and experiment with using them on different drums, different toms, cymbals, hi-hat, whatever it is. This way you can start to experiment with different sounds using this same sheet, but now you're switching the notes from just being played on the snare to being played on the toms. I'll do number one a few times, and I think I did this on the last show, but I'll do number one a few times using different tom combinations. Okay, if that last part wasn't right, I don't know. I just started to get into a flow, started to get into a feel with it, and it kind of sounded cool. I like the way the tom combinations sounded. So again, totally up to you. Start to work these different ideas around the drum set as well. All right, so let's get rid of this. Let's go back to this, and let's talk about the other thing I wanted to talk about, which is the show closer. And I'm going to do triplets with my feet. Okay, so I play double bass. I enjoy it very much. It's another set of hands. We should treat it as such. We'll be getting into more double bass as we move along down the road in future podcasts, in future drumcasts, in future shows. But as a quick thing, my favorite thing to do on double bass when I'm playing beats, for instance, are triplets. And so let me show you some eighth note triplets on the bass drums, playing eighth notes on the ride, snare drum on 2 and 4. Here we go. Okay, so 16th note triplets on the bass drums, 8th notes on the ride, which means for every ride cymbal that I'm hitting, I'm playing a triplet with my feet. And then on 2 and 4, I'm giving you a snare. So let's do 8th note triplets. Quarter note ride cymbal, snare on the 2 and the 4. Okay, so that's something that is a lot of fun to play. And again, once we get good at those triplet bass drum patterns, 8th notes, 16th notes, try to play them slow also. But once we get good at those triplet patterns, we want to start to rest some of those triplet notes so we come up with some more syncopated types of rhythms that have a little more interest to them. Those that I played are very straightforward. They're used in a lot of different types of heavy music. But there are also a lot of types of heavy music that use a more interesting type of rhythm where what you're doing on the bass drums is usually followed by the guitar, the bass, playing those rhythms and coming up with some really cool, interesting types of syncopated rhythms within the heavy music. So think about that, but again, slow, steady, even, okay? They don't sound good when they're not even. You heard a little bit of a wobble in the beginning. I felt it. And so that's something that you need to iron out before you start to move on to faster speeds and before you start to work on different patterns, right? Same thing with 16th notes. I'm not as much of a fan as 16th note double bass patterns underneath a beat that I'm playing. but they're fine. And that's another place where you can get your 16th notes down very well, very solid and on time at a pretty good speed. And then you could start experimenting with different rested notes to come up with, let's say, 1 E end, 2 E end, 3 E end, 4 E end, resting the or resting the E, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and between your feet in your bass drums. Excuse me. And then you could start to come up with your own patterns and start to mix and match these different rhythms that you're coming up with by taking those straight 16th notes and resting certain notes within the groupings to give you these cool kinds of syncopated rhythms. So that is Tripletmania for today, right? I like to just throw out a bunch of seeds, give you some ideas, give you some things to think about how we can take our triplets, how we can approach our triplets, what we can do that sounds really cool, what is really fun to do with our triplets. And like I said, taking books, practice material, and kind of changing it up to now allow you to expand on these ideas. So that's really the whole point of all of this, is I guess I like to just throw out seeds and ideas and then allow you to come up with whatever you come up with from it. But just so that you know that, yeah, these things are possible. Oh, wow, I never thought of that before. Little things like that. If I can plant those seeds and I can help you to really start to unlock that imagination a little bit, then that's great. That's what I'm looking to do. So any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the comment section. And thank you guys for coming by the show. I've been having a great time working here, doing the MarkZDrumcast. And it keeps me on my toes as well. I appreciate all the great feedback I've been getting from everybody out there. Thank you, and keep watching. The people that watch this later on, I appreciate you just as much as everybody that tunes in live. I know I have kind of a weird schedule because I do teach full time, so that usually happens in the afternoons. So this is the time, the show around noon, 1 o'clock, around that area is when you could look for the MarkZDrumcast live, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. So please, go to my link tree in the description. It's going to have links to all of my socials, pretty much MarkZDrums across all socials. YouTube is MarkZDrums, my full name. They did something weird with changing the name of my channel and adding numbers at the end. I don't know what that was about, but I ended up having to put my full name instead of MarkZDrums, MarkZDrums. But if you go to my link tree, you should find all of my socials there, including my TikTok, my Patreon, my Instagram, my Facebook, my website I'm still working on, Patreon I'm still working on. But all of that stuff, please go like, subscribe, share, comment, follow all of my socials and every single thing I do. It's greatly appreciated. And what else? What else? Oh, yeah. So I'm putting together an online drum course. I'm putting together a membership site also because I want you guys to be able to come and access all of the great stuff I have going on. Go ahead and check out my YouTube channel to get a taste of what I do and how I do it. I have instructional videos. I have drum cover videos, which I need to work on some drum covers this week to get some new, fresh ones up there. And I also have live performances, as well as concerts I've gone to, not just concerts I've played in, concerts I've gone to. So I have a lot of good stuff on my YouTube channel. Poke around there. Also have some fun looking back a ways, years ago, and look at how the videos looked. Look at where I was recording these videos, in the garage, in the basement, wherever I was and have been, until I got this great space inside the hollowed out remains of a gigantic clock. That's where I am, by the way. But anyway, thank you again, and I will catch you next time. Friday is the next show. around this time, noon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 11. But just keep checking back. And again, thank you so much, and I will catch you next time.